President Trump is set to sign a massive $900 billion defense package today. The National Defense Authorization Act includes funding for defense programs and a pay raise for U.S. troops. The act also demands more information on boat strikes in the Caribbean and requires that the U.S. send more military aid to Ukraine. But Senator Ted Cruz is among those raising concerns over a specific part of that bill dealing with aircraft. And now he sponsored his own legislation aimed at military helicopter safety to prevent another deadly mid-air collision like that one that happened at Reagan National Airport back in January. And Texas Senator Ted Cruz joins me now from Capitol Hill. Senator, first, thank you for your time. But I wanted to ask you, because your measure, the ROTOR Act here, it passed the Senate unanimously. I know you're hoping for the same in the House. Are you confident that it'll get through?
Well, I am. It was 11 months ago that we saw the tragic accident over the skies of D.C. when an American Airlines flight coming from Wichita, Kansas, collided with an Army Black Hawk helicopter. And in an instant, 67 lives were taken from us. That tragedy was horrific. I've spent a lot of time with the families grieving the loved ones they lost that night. That accident was also preventable. And in the wake of that accident, I worked with Democrats, authored bipartisan legislation called the ROTOR Act that mandates that, number one, all aircraft, including military aircraft, have what's called ADS-B technology. That is more advanced technology so that other aircraft can see them in the sky and air traffic controllers can see them in real time. The Army Black Hawk helicopter had ADS-B technology, but had it turned off. The military was routinely turning that off, and the ROTOR Act mandates that the military turn it on so that the other aircraft in the sky can see them. That legislation, as you noted, it passed on the floor of the Senate 100-0. Every Republican, every Democrat supported it. The president supports this bill. The administration supports this bill. And I'm confident in January the House of Representatives will take it up, will pass it, and will put it on President Trump's desk.
Well, and Senator, you mentioned that with the NDAA provision, you had not seen a single representative step forward and say, hey, I authorize this provision. Yeah. So how did this get through? How did this happen?
There was a provision in the NDAA that could be read by the Army as allowing them to continue leaving ADS-B turned off. And I think that was indefensible. It made no sense. I don't know how it got in there. I'm assuming some staffer on the House side put it in the bill. But regardless, yesterday, the United States Senate voted 100-0 to delete and repeal that provision. That was part of the ROTOR Act, as we explicitly repealed that provision. And so now the military will follow the rules that every other aircraft in the sky has to follow. And that's going to keep all of us safer. You know, every one of us, we get on airplanes, our family gets on planes, we put our kids on planes. And the objective should be to keep the flying public safe, because we don't want to be grieving another horrific accident. And we have a responsibility to do everything we can to prevent that.
Certainly, certainly. Well, and I want to pivot right now because as the Senate heads home for the holidays, we've got new polling from Quinnipiac. It shows that almost 3/4 of Americans disapprove of the job that Democrats are doing in Congress, but Republicans aren't faring much better. 58% disapprove of how Republicans are handling their job in Congress. And so I'm curious, Senator, does this worry you?
Well, listen, it is not new that people don't think terribly high of Congress. I think for a lot of years in polling, Congress polled just below venereal disease. So, I mean, that's not a new phenomenon. I will say I share those frustrations with this institution. But at the same time, this past year has been historic, and I think it's been an historic year of victories. You take a look at something like border security. One of the major issues in the 2024 election was the open borders and the risks that it posed to our families. We've seen this year illegal border crossings drop more than 99%. We're securing the border. You look at the working families tax cut that we passed this summer, the biggest tax cut of our lifetime. No tax on tips is in there. I authored no tax on tips. That's going to make a real difference for waiters and waitresses and barbers and taxi cab drivers and all sorts of working men and women all across this country. You look at more than $100 billion that we invested in border security. You look at more than $150 billion that we invested in rebuilding the military. And then you look at repealing job-killing regulations. What is that doing? That is bringing more and more jobs to America. It's also helping reduce costs. So the cost of gasoline across the country is down anywhere from $1 a gallon or almost as much as $2 a gallon. There are places in the country where you can fill up your tank now for under $2 a gallon. Those are real victories, but we need to keep working to deliver more.
Certainly. Well, and you brought up the economy, and that was something that President Trump spoke about last night, took a victory lap. But as you mentioned, the price of gasoline has gone down. But we have other goods like ground beef. It's up about 15%. Bananas up about 7%. You've got coffee, which is up 18%. President Trump, he spent a good bit of his remarks yesterday talking about the mess that he says he inherited from the Biden administration. But I'm curious, sir, at what point does this become Trump's economy?
Oh, look, the American people will always hold the current president responsible, but they also recognize that Joe Biden made a mess of the economy. That was a big reason why we had such a landslide victory a year ago, is people were unhappy with how bad the economy was. And I'll tell you economic data that came out just last week that showed rents going down and going down significantly across the country. And that's a direct result of the president and the administration enforcing our immigration law, and in particular deporting over 2 million people who are here illegally. Those 2 million people were driving up the cost of housing, driving up the cost of rent, and we're seeing rent now dropping. That makes a difference, but you are absolutely right that we have much more we need to do, but we're winning victories that are making a real difference.
Senator Ted Cruz, thank you for your time and look forward to the next one.
Thank you.